morning. It's a beautiful morning, a little bit breezy here in Wilson Farm Park in Chesterbrook, Pennsylvania, right near where we live. I'm shooting outside today as opposed to last week. Last Wednesday morning, Hurricane Ida was barreling down on us and it was already raining, so I recorded from inside. Today, a week later, the sun is shining. It's hardly any clouds in the sky, at least at the moment. And but since last Wednesday morning, a lot has happened here in the area. Wednesday night, Thursday morning, Philadelphia received a record 2.37 inches. North Philadelphia, 3.27 inches of rain. And they say that some of the outer suburbs received somewhere between 6 and 8 inches of rain. The significant thing about that is that most of that rain fell in the watershed for the Schuylkill River. And the intensity of that rainfall, it was compacted in a few hours after 5 p.m. a week ago, really created havoc. It overwhelmed the streams and the creeks that fed into the Schuylkill and then the Schuylkill itself. Right here in Wilson Farm Park, we are probably 1.5 miles from Valley Creek. This is the same Valley Creek where at one time in the mid-1700s there was a forge, Valley Forge. The forge is gone. The British destroyed it as they left the area before the revolutionary folks got here, but the creek remains. And late Wednesday afternoon and evening, this usually lazy creek turned into a raging torrent. It swallowed up the hiking trail that runs along the one side of it, and that's a trail that I've run up and down many times. It flowed over its banks and across the road, turning that 2-lane road into a river. One of my running friends' son is trained in water rescue, and he was called out last Wednesday evening to rescue a woman who had turned onto that road that had already now become a river. The Schuylkill River flows through Phoenixville, and many homes and businesses in the downtown area and downstream were flooded, some probably destroyed. One of the guys in my small group lives in an apartment complex along the banks of the Schuylkill, and he was only able to drive his car to safety up the bike path, the Schuylkill River Trail. It's a path that I've run up and down too many times to count. And I've not mentioned the tornadoes that hit the area, and there were many of them both here in Pennsylvania and over in South Jersey. So needless to say, it's been an interesting week. And they say we might get some more storms, some more rain this afternoon. We have a flash flood watch that goes into effect later today. But for now, it's calm and it's a beautiful, if a bit breezy morning. Enough of those type of literal storms. What I'd like to do today is talk about another kind of storm that is sweeping across our country and our world. And that is the storm of high conflict. Last week I mentioned that I had come across a book, Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict, Why We Get Trapped and How We Get Out. I ordered the book last Wednesday, and it finally arrived over the weekend. I think the delivery of the book was delayed because of the storm and the aftermath. Anyhow, I got a copy of the book and I've started to read it. And I've got to tell you, I'm fascinated. I was fascinated right off the top because the first section of the book, the very first pages, are a glossary of terms. Now, this is the kind of thing you normally find in an ominous academic tome that runs for 500 or 600 pages, the kind of stuff that most of us don't read. Not in a book of popular nonfiction. A glossary of terms, that was the first section. So let me introduce you to some of those terms. The first one is one I introduced you to last week, conflict entrepreneurs. Ripley's definition is that these are people who exploit high conflict to their own ends. In our day of an attention economy, there are a lot of people who make a living, and some of them a very good living, off of exploiting high conflict. They want to keep the fire stoked. Then let's look at her definition of high conflict. And I'm quoting here now. A conflict that becomes self-perpetuating and all-consuming, in which almost everyone ends up worse off. Typically, this is an us versus them conflict. There is no gray area. It is all black and white. It is us and them. In contrast, Ms. Ripley defines good conflict as friction that can be serious, but leads somewhere useful. It does not collapse into dehumanization. Now, this type of healthy conflict, and by the way, for people like me who don't really enjoy conflict at all, sometimes I think all conflict is bad conflict, but that's not true. Upon a moment's reflection, you can think of conflict, whether in the workplace, in the home, at school, wherever it might be, that is healthy. People have differences of opinion. People have different viewpoints. People have different perspectives, and they engage in conflict. But it's useful conflict. It's healthful and helpful conflict. And it does not collapse into name-calling and dehumanization. Well, let's compare and contrast these two types of conflict. The first is high conflict is self-perpetuating and all-consuming. When I think of this, I'm reminded of the old Bugs Bunny cartoons. Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam would come into some conflict, and Bugs Bunny would say, "Oh, yes, you are," and Sam would say, "Oh, no, I'm not." And after they would repeat this back and forth for about 20 times, Bugs Bunny would say, that wascally rabbit that he was, "Oh, no, you're not." And Yosemite Sam would say, "Oh, yes, I am." And then there would be that kind of moment accompanied by the appropriate music where Sam would come to the realization that he'd been tricked. Bugs and Sam had gotten into a self-perpetuating and all-consuming argument in which they had lost sight of what they were arguing about in the first place. The topic of the conflict is gone, and all that remains are the combatants. That's where high conflict leads, or those are its characteristics. Where does it lead? Where does high conflict lead, and where does good conflict lead? Well, good conflict leads to somewhere useful. Through an exchange of ideas, through an exchange of viewpoints, the two interlocutors move to a certain place, a new place, a useful place, something where they have learned something and gained something. High conflict, Ripley says, is where everyone ends up worse off. And if you think about it, if you think about your life and about situations you've been in, you can probably identify some situations of high conflict where everyone ended up worse for wear. Well, I'm running past time. Let me just give one more definition that Ripley offers, and that is the paradox number one of high conflict. I think there are 4 in the book, but let me just mention one. Here is the paradox. Listen to this. We are animated by high conflict and also haunted by it. We want it to end, and we want it to continue. So she says we have a love-hate relationship with high conflict. It makes us feel alive. We get a rush, an adrenaline rush, by creating and perpetuating it, and we enjoy watching others engage in it. It's good sport to watch. But in the moments of quiet reflection, we wonder what it is doing to us, those of us who are engaged in the conflict, what it's doing to our community, what it's doing to our society, and we suspect that it's not good. Just like someone who is addicted, we want more of high conflict, but in our sober moments, we realize that it is not healthy and must stop. Well, I went over time today, but that's it for our episode. I need to get back to reading. Hopefully in future episodes, I'll have some more insights to share with you from Amanda Ripley's High Conflict. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your questions. Share them in the comment section below. And if you think this is worth sharing, please do that with others. I'd remind you that shortly after this is posted on Facebook, I will have it up on my YouTube channel. I hope today that you have a good day. I hope you have good, fruitful, meaningful conversations that lead to somewhere that is healthy and happy and whole. Have a great day.